Welcome to the Idea Climbing Podcast. Today, my guest is John Hetherington, who is an expert in using technology to scale business and grow revenue, and he helps entrepreneurs use storytelling to accelerate their business growth. John has 10 years strategic consulting experience with Deloitte and Ernst & Young, and 25 years delivering technology projects in the UK and Canada. He lives in Calgary, but travels around the world for his clients and speaking. With all that travel going on, thank you for making the time, John. I appreciate it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, really looking forward to it and glad to be here, Mark.
And before we get into storytelling in the business world, I'd love to know your story. How did that become part of your offering? How did you get into storytelling?
Good question. So, and just to be clear, I'm not a master storyteller, but I'm a master at creating stories from data, information, and more importantly, putting data stories into our mindset. And the
Okay.
reason for that is because I'm a bit of a nerd, a geek. I always have been ever since I was a young lad. I loved reading user guides and building radio controlled cars and Lego kits. And then I got into computer science. So I always thought that just being an expert was enough. And when I got my first career in financial services after graduating electrical engineering, I thought do long hours, be first at the desk, first in the office, last at the desk, as it were, work long. But then I saw people getting promoted over me, and I was like, what is going on? I'm the expert here. I'm doing all this hard work. And what I realized is it's all about how you convey your story, your messaging, and put your value across. And that's how it all started.
So how does someone start as far as speak a little bit more about conveying the story? What do you mean by that? How can people do that effectively?
Yeah. Again, great question. So there's a structure actually, because I've studied. I love movies, so I've studied a lot of movies in terms of their story arc, the classic hero's journey. But what I found is that doesn't quite translate to business. So I've created a bit of a framework, the SHOW framework, the SHOW show, which breaks down how to create stories and put your message across. But what I want to start with, it's all around the story you tell yourself. That's the bit you need to start with. It's not so much what you're telling other people, it's what you tell yourself.
Okay.
Because if the story in your head is I can only achieve this, or I can only sell to these people, or I'm only at this level of revenue, ultimately you are limiting your behaviors and your potential. And I spent a long time in this because I'm an IT project manager by background. That's where I went to after starting the financial services, and it's all about what could go wrong. It's all about planning for issues and solving things. So your mind is trained around caution, around hesitation, around fixing things. It doesn't really focus on the art of the possible. So midway through my career, and when I started the business, We Deliver Your Vision, I really had to change that mindset to be, okay, it's not just about problems, it's about opportunity. Where could we go with this? So the story really starts with what you tell yourself every day, every morning.
So how does that translate into the show technique?
Yeah. So what it do is it starts with what I'll say a daily productivity plan. So the S is around setting yourself up for success. The S is that starting your day right. So that is before you even start with email, before you even start with meetings, is just sit down and start with, okay, what do I want to achieve today? Because if you're setting your day up in the right way, the rest of it tends to follow better. If you dive into email, which is what I used to do, you're then working to other people's agendas, and you might see a good email, you might see a bad email, and it tends to set the tone for the day. So it's like, no, let's stop that. Let's set what I want to achieve today, starting with my purpose, which is typically a 3-month goal. Then your projects, what are the key big rocks you want to achieve? Then the people, who do I need to reach out to, or who am I waiting on? And then the actual priorities, your to-do list. So the
Mhm.
4 Ps there of this start your day and show, that relates to the priorities, your to-do list. And that's what you must do today. And the key there is you block it into calendar. So that's how it starts on the show framework.
How does it, what happens after you get a good start to your day?
Yeah, so then you get into H, the SHOW. So the H is to highlight your insights. And this is where I love when you're conveying your message and you're in a meeting or in front of a potential investor or a client. There's so much data, so much information, so many benefits, so much you want to share. So what I like to use is what I call the insight sandwich. So again, it's maybe in the morning, so maybe you're feeling a bit hungry or around lunchtime or whatever, but we tend to just blurt out and drop a ton of data or information or benefits on our clients. So with business and growing business, it's around engaging them. So when you have an insight, you start with the insight. That's the first layer of the sandwich. Then you bring the data, the information, and then you repeat the insight. That's the insight sandwich. The insight, the data, and then the insight again. It's also similar to anyone who's been in the military around bottom line up front, the bluff. It's starting with the key information. So for example, when you're meeting a client, you're talking about a sales proposal around, maybe it's a marketing, or in our world, it's around automating a sales process or a finance reporting process. We start with we can save 3 days on your financial reporting process. We do this by looking at Power BI, looking at the automation process, looking at the re-engineering and design thinking. And as a result, that's going to save 3 days, which then give you time back in your day for more strategic projects. So that's how you have that insight sandwich around the insight, the data, process, and then insight.
So when you say strategic projects, can you talk more about that? What do you mean?
Yeah, so a lot of I'm often called in. I have a lot of success with CFOs, CIOs, operations directors, because they're firefighting all day. So I help, and these are founders as well, actually, because they're stuck in the weeds. So strategic projects are the growth projects for your company or your business to really achieve results. And that could be sales growth, could be hiring a team member, could be a specific project around launching a new product or service, or even just getting your ducks in a row, getting your processes optimized. But you find you never really get time for it. So by focusing on where we come into on efficiencies using technology, get the technology out of the way. That should be working for you, not against you. Should be holding you up. Then frees up the time for strategic work, strategic planning. As long as you time block it in calendar, it's so many times we work with clients, they free up the time and then they fill it with other busy work. And it's like, no. If you're going to free up this time, the first question I ask is, what are you going to do with it? And that's where we can talk around those strategic projects.
So if you want to get strategic, but you find yourself in the weeds, how do you get, I mean, I can relate to that. I think a lot of people can relate to that. How do you get out of the weeds to get strategic in the first place? I mean, what do you do to get out of there?
Yeah, so it starts with that S, the start your day right. So that's the purpose and the projects, the 2 Ps at the beginning. Because when you have a purpose of, I want to help CFOs with technology training to give them the skills they deserve to grow their companies, the projects might translate into develop a training program, might translate into automate a process, might be learn Power BI skills. So those 3 projects aligned to the purpose, and that purpose is all around the strategic. These are not, I need to meet with Bill, I need to make sure that the invoices are charged correctly, or even I need to sit on this interview. It's really thinking around those strategic high value add projects that are on macro level. They're 6 months, 8 months out, but really make a big difference on your business.
So where does action come into play? You get out of the weeds, you get strategic. What happens then? You have the strategies put together. Yes. What do you do to enact the strategies?
Yeah, so it's a couple of questions, a couple of ways to do that, actually. So we can also tie in the O of the show framework. So we talked about these start your day right, the highlight your insights with the insight sandwich. And then we get into O, which is organize your data and your thoughts. And the key there in terms of action is you need to appeal to different types of people, because not everyone's the same. I personally am more auditory. I like to listen. I like to take notes. Whereas some people are more kinesthetic. They like to take actions. They do workshops. They're very wavy, hands in the air and moving things around, get up on whiteboards and start writing things down. And then the final people are visual. They like to show. So they like to draw, like to see pictures, diagrams, video. So you need to think about your audience and organize your message in at least 3 ways: the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So when you get into tactics, you're conveying the actions based on your priority list in a way your team can take action, all based on that vision, that goal, because your team needs to have sight of, okay, here's where we're heading. Now let's break it down and get your team to identify the key actions to move forward, because they often have the best ideas.
Well, I could see with financial or even technology, very data driven. It can be very mechanical. Could you speak to how do you create stories? Or better question, why is storytelling so important? Why is it important to get into a story and not just say, here's 10 facts?
Because it doesn't engage people. I mean, you can get into facts. I mean, there are people like me, nerds like me, who do like data and lists, but most people need a hook, need something to engage them. And if you think about business, most business is fairly dry, fairly routine, fairly straightforward, and a bit boring, if I'm honest, sometimes. So weaving in stories creates, okay, this is different. You're going to get their interest straight away. So if you're trying to distinguish yourself amongst your competitors, or you're trying to convince someone or put across a new idea, using a story is a great example. It doesn't have to be a huge, great Marvel universe, Lord of the Rings type story. It can be as simple as using analogies. So I love analogies, like the iceberg is a great one because it's the tip of the iceberg above the ocean, and there's a huge amount below. So that's everything from scratching the surface. Journeys are always good, like the plane journey where this project is launching. We need to make sure it flies in the right way and it's safe. So we do the pre-checks, and then we make sure it lands so it delivers to clients. So you can use that plane journey. Family, organizing Thanksgiving dinners. How do you plan for that? How do you make sure everyone's sat in the right place so you haven't got the crazy uncle sat next to your grandma, and then avoiding any conflicts? So again, you can do little stories like that just to make your business a bit more real and interesting.
So if it starts with the hook, what makes a good hook?
Yeah, so I like to position it in terms of a place, a time, typically when I was doing something. So back in 5 years ago, when I was working with a client, we stumbled across this complaint from a customer. You're creating interest straight away with that, similar to the insight sandwich. You're creating that insight up front. So it's a time, a place, and a problem or a situation to get them to say, okay, tell me more. Why I need to know how this is resolved. And this actually taps into psychology of human nature. Actually, as humans, we don't like disconnects. We don't like disorder in the universe, if you like. It's the disturbance that we need to make sure is settled. So when you say 5 years ago, when we heard about these client complaints, you automatically think about, okay, what are they complaining about? How are we going to fix this? It's 5 years ago. So what happened since then? So you can start to create those hooks around just something to create interest, which is true. It's a true story, but it just frames it in a slightly different way.
So after you hook, this is good. After you hook them, then what?
Then you can use the insight sandwich. If you only have a bit of time, you can do it really short. Stories, often people think stories have to be minutes, half an hour, hours, or big multi-hour presentations. They're not at all. Stories can be 30 seconds. In fact, I'd actually encourage people to keep their stories really short, because people's attention span in this day and age is just so short anyway. So once you have that hook, then you can go into the insight. So based on when I was working with a client 5 years ago and customers were complaining, we fixed it by introducing one small change to their report. Okay, what was that report? So we analyzed the sales data, we looked at inventory data, we found that customers were complaining because of short shipping. Then you go back to the insight sandwich and then found it out by creating a report to show the salespeople when inventory was in stock and not in stock. They could tell customers when the product would be delivered, and that resulted in less complaints. So then you're closing that story of they were complaining, we created these new reports, and as a result, the customer's now happier because they know when their product is going to be shipped.
So is the middle of the story, is that, to break it down a little bit more, the middle part of that, is that where you put something persuasive, or are you intentionally sharing something? We did this with this client, we can do it with you. What's the gap between the hook and the close?
Yeah, so it could be data. Yeah, it could be data, could be facts. Yeah, it could be a process, your 3-step process for how we solved it. So in that example, we analyzed the inventory data. We realized the reporting wasn't there, so we created a new report. So the analysis, the recommendation solving with the client, and then the output, which was the report. So it could be your framework for your business, how you solve things. It could be how you approach problems. You're thinking about, okay, I think about this problem in this way by saying, okay, let's look at all the data and then come back with a recommendation. Could be your 5-step process for delivering products to clients in terms of the order process. So that's where because you've hooked them, you've got them permission to spend time with them, helping them understand how to get to that, how that hook was resolved.
So what if you raising it up like 10 miles high, what would you say makes a good, what would you say encompasses a good story or even a great story? What would you say to that?
The first thing is relevance. So it's when you're sharing any information, it has to be meaningful to the person you're talking to. So the first thing I say is you need to ask questions. You need to understand who they are, and actually do this as part of my networking for founders presentation speaking as well, is understand where they're coming from, what their situation is, their industry, their interests, their goals, because
Mhm.
then you can tune your messaging to who that is and their level. So if I'm talking to a CFO, I'll be talking about the growth of the company, revenue, finding opportunities to save costs, because that's what they're interested in. They don't really care about the Power BI report because that's for their team to deal with. But if I'm talking to their team, they're going to want to, okay, how do I do this without compromising my day job? I'm busy already, so how do I find time to do this extra automation that you're going to introduce to us? So it really depends on who you're talking to, which starts with asking questions of them to be curious as well.
What kind of questions? What are some examples?
Mm. So one of my favorite questions is, I'll tell you in a second, but I always like to ask, what are your goals for 2024? I mean, it depends where you're meeting them as well. So if it's at a conference, it's what do you think about that presentation or speaking? What brings you here today is, understand their business, set the goals. And then when you've built up a little bit of rapport, then you can actually start asking more in-depth questions, which again is all part of the storytelling. It's just breaking it down. So the question I always like to ask is, people often ask around what keeps you up at night, but I actually don't like that question. I think there's a bit too, what are you worried about most? I like to frame it the other way. What gets you up in the morning?
Hmm.
What's the itch you really want to scratch? Because then you're starting to uncover, okay, where do they want to go? What motivates them? And I find that question much more insightful than what keeps you up at night, because that's more problem focused. Whereas what gets you up in the morning is, okay, I'm excited about today because I really want to make progress on this new product we're going to launch. Okay, well, tell me more about that, and then you can start to build it from there.
So if it's where they want to go, would you say that you're guiding them along a journey? I mean, is that part of effective storytelling on you? Is if they want to go somewhere, are you actually telling them I can help you get there, or where does storytelling play once they answer that question?
Yeah, exactly that. It is a journey. I mean, stories are the based on the hero's journey from when they start with the problem, they go through the mentorship and the guide and learning something to get to the climax and then to the outcome. And pretty much every film movie is based on that. So again, similar with you in business and growing and helping clients, is you want to help them move forward. Their journey needs to progress. And it might not be you helping them on that journey. It might be you connecting them with someone else who can help. So if I come across someone who needs a new marketing or website, I'll either refer them on to someone who does that, or if they need a speaker reel or to promote their service, I'd refer them to you. So again, as long as you're helping them move forward, that's the journey you're moving them along.
Well, it sounds like what you're saying with connecting them to other people, that you can't be, it can't, one person can't be everything to everyone. It sounds like you have
Yes.
to know your zone of genius, your expertise, whatever you want to call it. How do you make sure you only speak to your zone of genius and you don't overlap and try and do something you don't want to do? How do you discover your zone of genius to help them on their journey?
Yeah, so interesting. Actually, opening up a whole different topic here as well, because I often, when I was going through developing my business and starting 13 years ago, was around, do what you love, find your passion. How do when you find what you love, you don't do another day's work in your life type statements. And I always struggle with this. I mean, for those who found that, awesome. I mean, that's amazing. I personally never quite found that, and I was struggling with that a lot. And so what I did is I said, okay, how do I do this? How do I get to what I enjoy most? And a couple of things spring to mind. One is, you're never going to enjoy everything about your job. So the work you do will always have something that's not that pleasant or just a bit boring. But there's things that are good that you need to recognize. And then secondly, just be curious, to your point around not doing things that you're outside your comfort zone or too in the wrong way, is just be curious and try new things. So there's a lot of advice around saying no to things. I'm actually a big fan of saying yes to a lot of things. I know that can be stressful, but by doing that, you'll start to understand, okay, I like this a bit more than I like this one. Okay, I'll keep doing this one. So to your point around how do you know you'll find your expertise and doing what you know you do best is just try new things. And if nothing else, just focus on what you look back on your career and what you've done well.
We've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. If
Yes,
someone's talking about
tons.
storytelling and you were to say
Yeah.
to get moving in the right direction or start your own story journey, whatever it might be, if you were to say at least do this one thing, what would you tell people to do? If it's just one thing above all, whether it's repeating something and reinforcing something you said or something we haven't touched on yet, what would that one thing you would tell them to do? What would that be?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple of things. So first is be very clear on what you've achieved. Like a lot of people don't recognize the projects they've delivered, the businesses they've stood up, the relationships they've created, and it could be family, personal, as well as business. But understanding that can help build your story. So I always, I was building my career, I was always focused back on the technology, and that was a bit dry. So, but when you recognize how the technology has been used in which project, or even just with your family, helping my mum out with using Skype for the first time all those years ago. It's again, these are little stories which you can then weave into technology training for leaders, which I do now, and things like that. So start with understanding your career and what your big achievements, that look back and recognize that. And then going forward, come into new client meetings and meetings with a team, or even just meetings with important people that you want to come across well to with I call it the 3x3. So have 3 diagrams or graphics or options, like things, frameworks that you might have used before, 3 case studies, and that pulls on your history and your things you've achieved, and then 3 sound bites or common questions. So what gets you up in the morning? We've been there, we've done that, we've delivered it. So I think of some statements or sound bites and then practice that before you meet them, because then you create that muscle memory of speaking it.
This has been excellent. If people want to find you online, where should they go?
Yeah, check me out on LinkedIn. So I post most days on LinkedIn, and follow me, John Hetherington. You can also go to my website, wedeliveryourvision.com. And yeah, those are the main places to catch me.
Sounds great, John. Thank you again. This has been excellent. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. Thanks, Mark.
And scene.